Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by two guests representing Pixel Vault, VGF and David, aka Economist. VGF is Director of Marketing, or perhaps more accurately, Director of Vibes with Pixel Vault, and David is Director of Communications. Founded in 2021, Pixel Vault aims to elevate crypto-native assets across television, movies, NFTs, video games, and sports. VGF and David, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Appreciate y'all. That's a killer intro.
Thank you. And I want to jump in before we get into all things Pixel Vault and really explore that ecosystem. I want to learn a little bit more about each of you and your backgrounds. David, we'll start with you for this one. So my understanding is you have a couple decades of experience in the banking industry, which is always such an interesting juxtaposition when you talk about cryptocurrency. So I'm curious, what led you to discovering crypto? And also, how on earth did you land the Twitter handle Economist?
So I'll start with crypto. So, being in the finance industry, you are always curious about new technologies that are kind of up and coming and how they might impact your industry. So I first discovered crypto, I guess it must have been in 2015 or 2016, and never really got into it and had a few cycles where kind of dabbled a little bit until really I discovered NBA Top Shot in early 2021. And like a lot of people, that ended up being like the real easy entry point for me, and really got me focused on crypto and NFTs. And I really enjoyed the space. I started writing freelance articles on the side, and come the end of 2021, I had an opportunity to join Pixel Vault full time, and I figured this is potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity. And, I jumped right on top of it. And, I've always been, very interested in technology. And, that's really how I ended up landing, this particular Twitter handle. I had friends who were really big into social media. I guess it was like in the late aughts, and they told me about this new site that was coming out that was supposed to replace AOL Instant Messenger called Twitter. And so I started, chatting with them on it, and I, grabbed a couple of handles just to have and figure out which one I would want. And this was one of them that I grabbed at the time. So I was just very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time.
So cool. And just a quick follow-up question. So you discover Top Shot and get a little bit deeper. Was there ever that conflict, that internal conflict being so embedded in the banking side of things of like that crypto is evil or bad or anything like that? Or did that not happen for you?
No, that never really happened for me. I've always been one to form my own opinions on things. And, I would say that, early on when I was first, playing around with crypto, it was probably a little bit too early for me. This was probably around the time that you had the Mt. Gox implosion. And, I said to myself, well, this is a little bit too risky. There's, too many potential pitfalls and hurdles, and I'll wait for the technology to be a little bit more there for folks like me who might not have the deep technical knowledge. And sure enough, over time, that ended up coming to fruition.
Nice. And VGF, my understanding is you spent a lot of time in Discord and in various discords and sort of built a reputation as someone who understood the sort of administrative and community sort of building aspect of different discords, and that maybe helped lead your way into crypto. But can you sort of break down your entry? Where were you before knowing about crypto? How did you actually find it, and what led to today for you?
Yeah, so I had kind of like passively observed crypto, like intrigued, but not enough to like jump into it for a number of years, primarily because like I was a broke college kid. Like I didn't have the capital to really invest. And come like 2018, 2019, it like hit my radar again. And I was like, dang, like if I was just in a place like financially where I would be able to jump into something like this, it would be really interesting. And then come like January of last year, I had gotten to a time and a place where I had a little bit of capital to kind of play with, experiment with. I got into retail trading over COVID a little bit, and I YOLO'd like I think it was like $1,000 into Doge at like a penny, and that was ultimately like my first actual crypto purchase was Dogecoin of all things.
Yes.
But that ended up like I ended up levering that into my first Ethereum purchase, my first NFTs, and that kind of set me on my way. Once I had the kind of light bulb go off, that switch click of like this is a way to sovereignly own digital assets. My experience, like VGF stands for video game freak. And I was huge into gaming, and once I saw that path forward, I was all in. I literally took about a month to get my affairs in order. Did not return to the gig that I had prior, and was basically working full time in Web3, playing catch up / get ahead until I was compensated to work full time in Web3. But yeah, so like my quickest value add when I was getting into the space was I had been on Discord since like 2016. I had managed, esports organizations and built communities before. And very early on last year, there wasn't a whole lot of people that really knew how to build out a Discord safely, securely. How do you build out a moderation team? How do you do this? Like education of your community, not to click links, turn your DMs off, like before all of that was popularized, like how do you build this out and be responsible as a project? And kind of word of mouth, I built a little bit of a reputation for myself. And before I knew it, I was adminning, like in the teens or like 20 Discords or so. And then it was kind of how I got involved with Pixel Vault was I was honestly just a fan. Like I saw the idea of Punk's comic #1 before it had minted, and I reached out. I was like, hey, I love what you guys are doing. This is what I do. Like, yeah, how can I help? And so I was the one that helped build out Pixel Vault's Discord initially, kind of started dabbling on like, come to market strategy and operations and, things like that here and there. And before I knew it, the next couple of months blinked by, and I was getting an offer to join the team full time. So it was definitely an adventure, but Discord was kind of like my foot in the door to all of it.
I love it. It's something we've talked about with a number of guests, and it's always at the top of my mind because part of what we're doing here on Show Me the Crypto, beyond educating and informing and entertaining, I like to think too we're advocates for the industry as a whole, and that includes working in the industry, especially because I think there's a lot of people who think if they're not a developer that there's nothing for them in crypto and Web3, that what am I going to contribute? What can I do? Right. And so it's interesting when we get chances to talk to people who work in the space, who aren't devs, right? And so my, what I wanted to bring up here is your path to having an actual paid gig, but how that started out with essentially just volunteering. And it's an interesting point because I actually think in the world of crypto and Web3, there is, I don't know if it's a unwritten sort of expectation or what it is, but there's certainly in the world of Discord, there's this, with DAOs and with the way that everything is so community driven, a lot of people come into the space and just start offering up their time and to just get involved and just taking on responsibilities. And I don't know if that's good or bad at the individual level, right? Because it's people just giving away their time, but arguably it's their passion and they want to do it. So my question, going back to you is, at the time, did you know that you were giving up your time in hopes that it would lead to a paid position at some point? Or is that just a natural evolution and just something that sort of happened?
So I look at it like it was a bet on myself, a leveraged bet. I would highly discourage people from doing what I did and just leaving the paying gig behind and just like YOLOing into it. I was at a time and a place in my life where like I had no significant other at the time, no kids, own my own home, like my overhead was limited, and like I took that as a gamble. But I also had, like the position of like, this is a time and a place in crypto, in NFTs. And if I'm going to make this leap, like it's now or never, basically. Like I seized that opportunity, like knowing that I wasn't a coder, I wasn't a developer, I wasn't particularly an artist in the traditional sense. And so I knew I wouldn't have this sort of conventional road into being, an NFT artist or a Solidity dev or anything like that. And so I jumped in and added value where I knew how. And for me, that was education and in building out Discords. And I think for a lot of people, it's like, what is your passion? What are you good at? Like to your point there, it's kind of like this kind of contribution based economy where you may not be initially rewarded for it, but building that reputation of like, what value are you able to give, provide? Like, we're now looking at like accountants and like HR and there's a broadening of roles that we're in need of to fill in Web3 beyond just the kind of 3-4 person teams that were so popularized last year. And to me, that's like really interesting. It's like there's a little bit of a piece for everybody in Web3, even if the space may have not caught up to it yet. I do believe that just like any other industry, there'll be a place and a role for just about anyone that's currently looking for it, because just about everyone will eventually be here, and that it's not like it all needs to be bootstrapped or that you need to give away your time for free and all of it. It definitely doesn't need to be charity, but building that reputation for yourself and adding value before you ask for it back, I'm extremely passionate about.
Before we dive deep into all things Pixel Vault, I want to get both of your thoughts. David, maybe we'll start with you for this one on 2021 and NFTs, because in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinions, like that was the story of the bull run, is just how big of a moment NFTs had. So David, kind of going back to that moment of NBA Top Shot, getting involved, making some purchases, getting some packs there. Did you ever imagine or foresee the year that NFTs would have?
No, mostly because I was really new into the NFT world when I started with Top Shot, and I really felt like I lived in a bubble with NBA Top Shot, and kind of saw that initial really big rise and pretty quick fall of Top Shot kind of in the through April of 2021. And it was actually watching the Top Shot cycle that, got me curious about, what other NFTs were out there. And, I love to tell the story that, I scrapped together about, I don't know, like $200 worth of ETH. And I bought a Zed Run horse from, one of my friends who happens to live, in the same town as me. And then, that horse had a couple good runs, and then I sold it for an ETH. And that really is what kind of, got me started in really digging deeper into, Ethereum NFTs. And, and at that time, and it's really hard to imagine this, especially if you're coming in the latter half of 2021 or in 2022, there really weren't a lot of big NFT projects at that time. There were CryptoPunks, there were CryptoKitties that had been around, but they weren't really so popular anymore. And just some new projects that were coming, Appymon, which will probably bring some memories back for some people. And then, the Bored Ape Yacht Club popped up, and, I found out about that because a whole bunch of folks that, I was in a Discord with from Top Shot, they were saying, hey, there's this new project. It might be worth minting it. So, I grabbed a few, and I thought, all right, well, I minted token, 1332 and 1333, and these are kind of cool. Maybe I'll mint some more tomorrow, because at that time, you were dealing with a lot of those FOMO ramps that projects had, where the prices would escalate exponentially over time, and this was the first project that didn't have one. So we weren't used to projects minting out right away. It was all right, well, this project will be around for a week or two, and then I woke up the next morning and they were all sold out. And that was a really, pivotal moment when I'm thinking, oh, wow, these things can sell out really quickly. And then it just kind of all escalated up from there. And then it went from a handful of projects to just a handful of projects minting every day. And it really was just quite a run to just be a part of. And that whole experience is just something that'll be very hard to recapture anytime soon.
VGF, before I go to you on this one, because I want to ask you the same question of your thoughts on the 2021 NFT run. But David, did you hang on to those apes, or what was the story? Did you flip them?
Well, I didn't hang on to those two particular apes, but I still have a couple. A friend and I, we were buying and selling them, and sold a whole bunch of them way too early. But at the time, we're like, oh wow, this is great. We made a little pocket change off the, on the side. And, sure enough, I guess it must've been in November or December. That's when things really started to pick up. And, I had cycled out of a couple assets in October. So probably not the best timing, but, it was, it's still a lot of fun. And, I definitely picked up a pretty sizable portfolio over the last year.
It's hard to beat a story. Was it Alex from Nansen? It was the craziest thing I've heard. He minted, I want to say 20 Bored Apes, and he sold them all under one ETH. He didn't keep one of them. And it's heartbreaking. VGF, how about you? Thoughts on the overall 2021 NFT world?
To me, it kind of captured a time and a place of where the NFT space was in its development, its maturity, because NFTs have been around. It wasn't a particularly new concept, but the audience it was exposed to exploded. For a lot of artists, that Beeple sale, and reading about it on the news and seeing these articles that onboarded an entire generation of artists into NFTs. And, in my mind, some of the standouts, Gary V, the art blocks kind of run, some of these standout pivotal moments that onboarded and kind of ignited entire markets within NFTs, like kind of sub-markets within NFTs. And obviously, Yuga and BAYC, kind of the social club membership. And for me, that was kind of like when I saw like the apes jumping into clubhouse rooms and doing the whole shtick, and like, that like clued me into like that this can be like a capture of culture. And I don't know that we'll see exactly that kind of run again, or at least that it may not feel the same. But I have no doubt like there will be projects that run in similar ways. I just don't know that it'll be, a couple dudes that have a good idea and based on speculation alone, that it takes off. I think that the NFT space has matured to a point where people are doing a little more due diligence, are getting a little more involved, to have a little bit better idea of what it is that they're buying, and that they have higher expectations of the level of accountability that they hold these projects to. So to me, I'll always look back fondly on last year, whether it be kind of like the friends that I've met, the opportunities I've received. For me, like, I didn't have the bankroll to get into a lot of these opportunities. Like one of my kind of sob stories maybe. I was Justin Aversano's Discord admin when Twin Flames were like an ETH. And like he pitched me over and over and over again. It wasn't out of my lack of faith of the dude. Like, obviously I believed in him. I just pure and simple, like, did not, like, short of selling my car or mortgaging my home, like, I did not have the money because I went all in on Web3. And that was my money to like ensure that I had a place, like a house over my head. Right. And so I say that somewhat fondly because like it's kind of like, when I boil it all back, it's like I just didn't have the money. But some of those opportunities certainly would have been nice to take advantage of if I did. But yeah, I mean, like even then, like I've still done spectacularly well with I started out with like an ETH, and basically everything from there has kind of snowballed. So even then, even missing some of the biggest opportunities that I've ever been presented with, hindsight's 2020, and it's still outperformed so disproportionately just about anywhere else I could have put my money, that I'm super grateful.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode.
Well, let's shift gears here and get into all things Pixel Vault. Definitely looking forward to learning about it as we dive in. But what I want to do is approach it, make sure that you guys are approaching it as we ask these questions as if, we know nothing about it, and also like our audience knows nothing about it. And I say that specifically with Pixel Vault because Wade and I've talked with lots of different guests, but Pixel Vault in particular has a lot going on. There's a lot here. There's a lot to cover, and it can get confusing, I think. So the more you guys can break it down as if we know absolutely nothing, the better for everyone. And that's awesome. So that said, can you just tell us, where did Pixel Vault begin? What was the original idea? And then breaking it down step by step, where did it start and where's Pixel Vault today? I know that this is a big question and it might take a little while. So take your time. And yeah, if you can touch on at least the high level points to kind of get the concept and the projects across, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I guess I'll jump in there because I'd been with the team since earlier on. But it initially started with kind of this concept of, people were starting to rock their PFPs on Twitter. That CryptoPunks in particular, started, you look at G Money and 6529 and some of these massive personas now. But back then it was kind of like a fairly new concept that these otherwise anonymous individuals were building these kind of personas and characters for their CryptoPunks. And our CEO and founder, Sean Gearin, G-Funk, had this idea to kind of expand on that a little bit and kind of caricaturize this pool of CryptoPunks and brought on Chris Wall, DC Marvel comic book artist, to kind of bring them to life and develop these characters, these backstories, and kind of have this kind of loosey-goosey, fun Web3 native comic book. And that was kind of the seed of the idea for Punks Comic #1. And there was a lot of, game theory and, kind of the tokenomics involved, the 16 CryptoPunks that the characters were initially based on were put into a fractional.art, which is a fractional.art pool that was then fractionalized, and you could stake your comics for these tokens, representing fractionalized ownership of these assets, or you could burn it for the Founders DAO token, which was, fuck render art, now established as an official legal wrapped entity and all of that. So it's kind of like this push-pull dynamic that there's not a right or a wrong answer here, but how is the community going to weigh this decision? And that'll ultimately reflect what happens with the tokens. And at that time in the NFT space, that was a pretty novel concept. And I think, to the credit of Punk's Comic #1, I think something 70 or 80% of our hires now, or that are employees of the company now, originally started as collectors. And so for an idea like that to gravitate and attract the talent that we now have as part of the team, I think is a testament to how powerful it was at the time. So kind of skipping forward a little bit, with Punks as kind of that Web3 native, more kind of fun, off the wall comic book, the idea was kind of seeded to bring in Odious to help incubate the metahero concept, which is more of a traditional superhero world building, storytelling lore, with some of its own unique twists on the minting experience, generative at the time of mint, using Chainlink VRF and some of these kind of fun concepts at the time. And that's really kind of where it was off to the races, the aspirations to develop this gaming ecosystem owned and governed by a DAO. And it became much more than just a project. And that was kind of the beginning of that. Pixel Vault is, the company behind these things, but the either the complication or the benefit, depending on how you look at it, is you don't have to jump in and participate in all of it if you don't want to. You can pick and choose, kind of pick your flavor of what resonates with you. And in my eyes, that's opportunity. You don't have to go and collect everything that's part of the grander Pixel Vault ecosystem in order to be involved with pieces of it. I think at that point, soon thereafter, was David's entrance to the team. So maybe he has something to add or take over there.
Yeah, just kind of, building on to VGF's point, we're an ecosystem of options. And, we get this question a lot about, well, where should somebody start? And, that's such a hard question to answer because it all really comes down to, what is your personal preference? And, I usually break it down, fairly simply is, if you're a really big fan of, comic books, especially like Web3 and a lot of like those inside Web3 jokes, then, Punk's comic and, buying at least one comic and just taking a look through it just to see if you, really enjoy the story world, that's really a good place to start. Or if you do like the superhero world, there are so many different entry points, like, in that particular ecosystem. You could start by, purchasing either a generative identity or a mid-pass one, which allows you to create your own generative identity that's, randomly generated, or, even, down to, purchasing some planets and being part of the governance process that is, really starting to come into its own with the UpDAO. There's just, so many ways that you can start. Or if you just enjoy like a really good chat of people who have been in the space for a while, a Founders DAO token is great. There's they have their own treasury of assets, a lot of which, includes, parts of the Pixel ecosystem, some really cool one-of-one art, and some other NFTs that were donated by community members over time. So there's really a lot of places that you can start to jump into the ecosystem. And as we continue to evolve, there will be a lot more clarity and a lot more cementing of how these ecosystems are going to have their tokens interact with one another. And we're really excited to start sharing more and more of those details over the rest of the year.
David, as Director of Communications, obviously you and VGF doing a great job on a lot of podcasts recently and explaining this story and that type of thing. But is that part of the trajectory, is to kind of simplify the message? Because that's kind of been a common theme of there is so much going on, which is incredibly admirable, but almost for some people, they might feel intimidated or almost too much going on. And so is that part of the push, or is the attitude, no, we're going to keep building this big thing and people will find their fit in wherever kind of suits them? They don't have to be part of all of it. As a company, is that part of the push?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. So, we are, at heart, storytellers in a media company. It's not as if we started with a 10,000 generative, profile picture project. We started with comic books. So, from day one, we're storytellers, and we're going to continue to, expand on our stories, both in the Punks comic world and in the MetaHero universe, and some other things that might be coming down the road that we just can't quite share just yet. So, all the storytelling will ultimately bring people back to the other parts of our ecosystem. And we really do want to simplify it. And, we've been working a lot this year on, what we're calling the table stakes, and that being infrastructure. So, for one, it's technical infrastructure. It's the creation of our own marketplace that does a really good job of simplifying how people interact with all of our collections. It was a creation of Prism, which is the all-in-one discussion and voting platform for the UpDAO, which is a DAO with 10 sub-DAOs and is a very complicated structure that required its own technical solution, so that anybody who is new to the ecosystem can jump right in and say, oh, this is pretty simple to navigate, instead of having probably about 20 different websites to vote on everything else. Participation is difficult as it is, so we didn't want the technical solution to add an additional layer of complexity there. And and the last bit of infrastructure, which doesn't really get seen, it's the creative infrastructure, which goes on behind the scenes and isn't publicly visible. But when we say that we're storytellers, that starts with understanding what the framework is of the stories that we're going to tell actually is. And I've been saying this recently. We're not here to tell stories for 3 months. We're here to tell stories for years and years. So that starts with making sure that your creative framework is strong as well.
So let's dive into some of these things, these pieces of Pixel Vault at a more individual level, and maybe we can help whoever is listening who wants to choose pick their poison. Maybe we can help them figure out where they want to start. So taking it back to the comics, to the Punks comics, let's start there. You say that your Pixel Vault is a media company first. You guys are storytellers. Tell us about the Punks comics as far as where that started with issue 1 and where it's going with issue 2 and onwards.
Sure. So Punks comic number 1 was the original, the genesis, and kind of built out this background, these stories that had kind of like caricaturized larger than life personalities to them. And from there, Punks comic number 2 was our sort of branching out. It was done in partnership with BAYC, G Money, and Adidas. So that was like kind of a pretty pivotal moment in time, bringing kind of this massive Web 2 company into the equation as well. And at the time, like it was kind of unique in that it was the first time that something like BAYC had individuals with their licenses, their commercial use licenses, able to be leveraged to be featured in a comic book. And so we held a contest that ultimately kind of like March Madness style led to the selected winners, which ultimately were then featured in that comic. And with their commercial licenses, were beneficiaries of that mint. So it was definitely kind of a really unique dynamic of like involving, massive Web 2 organizations, Web 3 personalities, and then bringing in with the special editions these community members as well. And then I would say there's kind of the branch there that we then spun out the origin stories, which was intended to kind of be like, okay, yes, we are storytellers, but not all of these are going to be such big, grand, long stories. Like, how do we provide, a little bit of a more regular cadence, build some of the backstory for a lot of these characters, and origin stories is the avenue to do that. So they're a little more like, think digital comics, right? Like they're a little more brief. They're quick reads, and it kind of helps give context to the broader story. And then we had Punks comic number 3, which was the MetaHero crossover. And that was like a really interesting inflection point, because it was, really the point that like these core characters, these MetaHeroes, were brought to life for the first time. And I think that's kind of now taking a life of its own, which is pretty cool to see, like, how the original Punks characters, the initial MetaHeroes, and then to have them, embodied in this story. It's definitely kind of becoming the grander vision that we initially saw for it.
You mentioned earlier, I think both of you, DAOs. And so there's the Founders DAO, and then the Up DAO. Is that the Planetary DAO, if I'm correct? So what are the purposes of those DAOs? Like, what is it that they kind of have governance over?
So they definitely have 2 very distinctly different purposes, for sure. So I'll start with the Founders DAO. Early on in the Pixel Vault ecosystem, and like really right from the very beginning, for those who either minted a Punks comic 1 or purchased one off the secondary, had the opportunity to make a decision. You could keep your comic, claim a physical version of the comic, and use that to potentially get Punks tokens, or you could burn your comic and it would give you a Founders DAO token, which is essentially one governance vote over what is the Founders DAO. And ultimately, like during that window while it was open, the community landed on about 5,900 Founders DAO tokens, with another 4,100 comics kind of remaining in existence at that point in time. And within the Founders DAO, it's really a treasury of mostly artwork, and it is a very dedicated group who hang out in Discord a lot. We talk about the Pixel ecosystem.
It's my second home.
Yeah, mine too. We talk about the Pixel ecosystem. We talk about other projects that are going on. We get into some really fun debates as to whether or not you need to have butter or mayonnaise for your grilled cheese sandwiches. Like, we just get into some really, fun discussions there. Sometimes we jump in on voice chat and just like goop around. So it's become kind of like a smaller niche, like sub community within the community. So it's just a fun spot to hang out in. Whereas the UpDAO has a very different purpose. When Pixel Vault launched its planetary token sale, gosh, I don't remember the date. I would say it was probably summer of 2021, maybe July or August. And VGF can correct me if I'm a little bit off base there. There was a decision that was made that when the planet tokens were sold, 55% of the proceeds went into what was called the UpDAO. And the whole purpose of that was to provide a community governed treasury that would allow the community to help make video games with the company. And as time has evolved, and we've had the opportunity to set that DAO up, and a lot of making sure that we were doing it right. So it took some time to get that set up, and everything launched in August of this year. And yeah, so there is about just under 8,000 ETH currently sitting in the treasury that the community can use to build alongside Pixel Vault within its gaming ecosystem. We had our first what will be a roughly monthly cadence of calls with our VP of blockchain gaming and tokenomics to talk about what the first game is going to look like, and really what Pixel Vault is like starting to help incubate in that area. And we're really excited for what's to come. The first game is what we're calling an auto brawler, which is going to be a 3 versus 3 auto battle game that is going to be set in what we're calling a PV classic style, which is the Chris Wall style meta heroes. And folks who have their meta heroes can basically have fun playing like auto battle games against their fellow community members, and like it's going to be a lot of fun once it launches.
One thing I'm interested about, and this is based on some of the Discord communities that I'm in, and I'm wondering for you guys. So there's such, as you mentioned, with the Founders DAO, there's lively discussion, people living in there constantly communicating about different things. Do you find, like, what is the positivity versus negativity level? And the reason I ask that is some of the other NFT community Discords that I'm in, there is a lot of negativity, it seems like, and it depends what the project is, but just in terms of like, are they doing enough? Like what's pushing forward, maybe happiness with certain decisions and that type of thing. Do you find that like kind of as transparently as possible in the Pixel Vault Discord, or for the most part, is it a pretty like collaborative, supportive community?
I'd say, there's definitely room for constructive criticism. We're both economists, and I, like, again, we practically live there. So we're always happy to get in there and engage with community, even if they aren't, the biggest fans of decisions that have been made, or with the market the way that it is, some assets have depreciated in value perhaps from where they bought it. By far and large, especially those that have kind of come along for the ride from earlier on, holders are generally pretty happy. Again, with room for constructive criticism. And we did take earlier in this year a time of kind of like having a hard reset on our communication style. For quite a while there, we were out every single week with, weekly town halls with our CEO out, out in front, G-Funk going and directly addressing community questions and concerns. And very, very quickly, at least for where we kind of were as a company, it wasn't particularly sustainable. So G-Funk took a step back, focused on kind of steering the ship, and we had a reset of our community's communication style and kind of expectations. And now we've kind of committed to basically only teasing things when they're almost imminently ready. We're trying to kind of avoid as best we can the anticipation and hype, bubble that it almost inevitably has to pop, and focus on building true sustainable value. And that might not be everyone's cup of tea. Some people just want number to go up. And certainly we aim to provide value back to token holders, whether it be, airdrops, claims, mints, experiences, and that we do target like providing value back to these token holders. But the express purpose isn't, driving anticipation and hype for hype's sake. We really want it to be driven based on shipping products and generating experiences that people ultimately value.
Yeah, and as I say, and just to that point, it is that's a very tough strategy to implement, especially coming off of, as we were mentioning earlier, like the 2021 and earlier in 2022 bull runs. And I can certainly say it's not for the faint of heart. And the community is very honest and transparent with us. And I do want to say that we have a view that we don't really like moderate what people are saying unless it gets beyond just positive or critical feedback and getting into personal attacks. So we welcome the feedback, even if it might be something that is tough to hear. We still welcome it because we always want to know what the community is thinking. And sure, sometimes they come up with great ideas that we can implement. Sometimes we come up with great ideas that we just can't do for any number of reasons. And sometimes they just come up with ideas that are going to be outside of scope of what we're planning to build. But regardless, we want to hear all the feedback.
And sometimes we come up with ideas that the community later shares, and they think it was their idea. That's a little poke and tease, but it's kind of been fun because like in the last 8-10 months, the focus really has been on building behind the scenes and kind of teeing ourselves up for everything else that is kind of going to be unveiled in the coming months and years. But especially in the next few months, it's kind of like, okay, through the summer, we had, this kind of quiet period earlier this year. You made it through the summer with us. We've started teasing out some of these little breadcrumbs of what is to come. And now it's kind of taking some of those big swings. And I think David and I in particular are especially excited to see how it's received.
Yes.
So while we're on this subject, I think it makes sense to ask about your thoughts on sort of speculation in the space, particularly with NFTs, in this case, because we've talked with lots of guests on this subject matter, and it's super interesting, I think, when we talk about NFTs, more than, let's say, just buying crypto tokens, like crypto assets of some other kind that have, monetary value in that sense. Because with NFTs, we talk about it if it's artwork, let's say, in the form of, does the person actually just value the artwork, and do they want to have that artwork to hold and love and cherish because they like it? Or perhaps we're not talking about artwork, but maybe it's rather, if it's DAO focused, is it because they truly want to be a part of the community and they want to have their voting share and they want to get involved? Obviously there's a number of aspects when we're talking about Pixel Vault and the different projects you guys have going on there. But what are your thoughts on for Pixel Vault, for one, people getting involved? Is it speculation based, or is it a genuine interest to participate or love for the project or that sort of thing? And then outside of Pixel Vault, on the greater scope of just in NFTs in general, do you think that, as much as we know for sure, a lot of it is driven by speculation, where do you think that's maybe going in the future? Will projects built on speculation survive? Is the market built on speculation and that's okay? What are your thoughts on that subject?
So I would say, like early on, I think any project that minted in 2021, I would say a lot of it was fueled by speculation, and that was just more so, how the market was working. And that probably, continued on through what was a, pretty quick super cycle in like the first half of 2022. And now with where the market is today, there is still definitely speculation, but you're starting to see, a lot of folks getting into the projects that they are, basically calling their highest conviction bets. And I'm sure you're going to see a lot more consolidation of like folks getting into those projects probably towards the end of the year, especially as, people who might have had some pretty big gains in the early half of 2022 are going to start cycling out some tax losses, at least in the United States, and in other countries around the world where that makes sense. I think you're going to start to see more and more separation of people staying in the projects that they really have the biggest convictions in, and kind of like exiting some of the other ones. And what I think that means for in the future is, and if some folks might not like this view, is that dilution is coming, in that for a lot of like the largest projects that are out there that want to continue growing their ecosystem and get the next million users into their ecosystem over the next few years, it's not going to happen with $100,000 assets. There's just not a lot of folks who are willing to be spending that kind of money, on those assets. Where I truly believe things are moving towards are going to be like, smaller microtransactions where you can buy a digital asset for, $5, $10, $20. And if it goes to zero, then maybe you lost like a week's worth of coffee. But if it happens to do really well and you get entertainment value that exceeds that $20 or whatever that you put into it, then it's going to create some genuine happiness. So it's like this space, I really believe, is at a crossroads at this point. And I personally think it's healthy. And from a Pixel Vault standpoint, we're definitely focused on like building out like strong stories, strong IP, and really giving folks that entertainment value, whether it's going to be from storytelling or gaming or some other things that they might have up our sleeve for the future. And that's where I believe this space will go over the next couple of years.
Just to build on that a little bit, I think it's really interesting that like I think in many of our heads kind of chunk NFTs down into a few different buckets. There's the art, there's the PFPs and utility kind of projects, and then access tokens. But I think that's just the beginning, right? I think that we'll only continue to see further diversification, more shades of gray, and that the idea, the concept that you could have these digital things and not have sovereign ownership over them is silly, because everything is, the technology enabling or enabled by NFTs will just permeate through the world, through culture. And the idea that you could have like even a digital file that you didn't have ownership of is just kind of like ridiculous. And so I do think there is some level of kind of consumerism that's being driven to at the end of that road, that people will buy what they intend to have and to hold because they appreciate it and they enjoy it, or they want to have, that experience, rather than purely because they just anticipate number will go up. I almost liken it to like my casino money, right? Like if I go to the casino and I spend the money and I have enough fun to justify that expense, like it's still worth it to me. And ultimately, like kind of with NFT, like if I still spend that money, it goes to zero and I still have a pretty picture to show for it. Like that's enough, quote unquote, for me, as long as, promises, expectations are fulfilled. But then if it also so happens to appreciate in value, that's win-win-win, all the better, all the way around. And so that's where I think it comes more so down to the projects, to the companies, is building out, in such a way that it does incentivize and reward your community, your holders, but also supports the ability to scale and have those other points of entry, more accessible, products that can potentially onboard, the next 100,000 million, hundreds of millions of users. And I think that, as David kind of tangentially touched on, I think gaming is going to be a very large part of that.
One thing I find admirable about both of you is that you are here in a bear market. So we had this bull run and number went up, and then we had this decline, similar to what many in the space experienced in early 2018. But you're both here, you're both building. The question is partly what gave you that kind of conviction, but also just from Pixel Vault's perspective in general, what's it like building in a bear market? Is it difficult? VGF, earlier you mentioned, you're starting to think about hiring people like accountants and these different things, but
just to clarify, we already have.
Oh, there you go. But like, yeah. Are you feeling the squeeze of the bear market at all? Or was there enough kind of like advanced planning that you have confidence you'll be fine through this bear market? VGF, I'll start with you for that.
Sure. And so like, yeah, we are in a privileged position to have had some early success last year, to have raised the funds that we did. We did go and raise outside capital before it was needed, and so when the bear kind of did hit, we were in a position to where we didn't have to very dramatically draw back. If anything, we kind of focused in on the projects that we, the IPs that we already had released, kind of took the broad view and focused it back in a little bit. But it's a very kind of nice position to be in, where we have that runway to continue to build. The teams since like early this year scaled from in the teens to well over 60 employees at this point. A
Wow.
Good chunk of them dedicated expressly on developing the gaming ecosystem. But it's not a small team by any means. And David and I, along with G-Funk being somewhat of the more outwardly facing personas, but there's a lot of really passionate, really involved people, super excited to build out and develop these worlds, these lores, these technologies. And I don't know. To me, that's the fun part of it, right? Like, if you're not, like for me, like my core initiative when I got into trying to work in Web3 was just building cool stuff with awesome people, and that still rings true to me today. Like I'm very grateful to be in the position that I get to work with the team that I do, and that we yes, it has been rather difficult, in continuing to try and release products into a bear and hopefully align it to where there's demand for it. But I think long term, it's a bump in the road. As long as Pixel Vaults can continue to deliver and continue to explore and experiment, that's where I see Pixel Vault being one of those companies that will be around for a while.
So on that note, where does Pixel Vault go from here? What are you working on? And I know that you already mentioned earlier, you don't want to hype everything up too far in advance.
Bit of alpha.
But what can you tell us about what you're working on today and what we might see in the future?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing is going to be storytelling and gaming, which has been really a common theme, throughout this whole podcast. So, we announced today that, our next version of Origin Stories is coming out on Wednesday, October 12th, which I know is going to be, after this, podcast might actually start to air. And, kind of talking about building in a bear, that whole structure of Origin Stories has pivoted. So we basically released about 5,900 Origin Stories from the first one. And instead of saying for every follow on, mint, it's going to be an additional cost for folks, the decision then became, all right, well, if you have a whole bunch of Origin Stories number 1, you can burn that for Origin Stories 2. And then when Origin Stories 3 came out, they went to mint, Origin Stories 2 closed, and so on and so forth. And then, that's how it's going to work for 4. You can burn either Origin Stories 1 or Origin Stories 2, or Origin Stories 3 to kind of get your Origin Stories 4 comic. And one way to, reward our collectors for participating in, that part of the ecosystem is, since these stories are, very short, there'll be kind of like an anthology of the, first set of 8. And in order to be able to claim that anthology, you have to have, a token from, Origin Stories 1 through 8, which, with the windows kind of closing as the next one comes, if one doesn't happen to be not very popular, then that becomes really the bottleneck for the whole set. So last I checked earlier today, Origin Stories 3, which is the current one, had under 400 mints. So if that doesn't go up fairly quickly over the next roughly day or so, then that ends up being the bottleneck, and then this physical set becomes like a very limited physical set of well under 1,000 pieces. And we have more stories coming in our superhero world, and as we touched on earlier, we really are building out a pretty big gaming world that we're focused on, which again is going to span over years, not months. So lots of really fun things to come, which are meant to, allow our existing collectors to, use what's already in the ecosystem and, really kind of build on that entertainment value and really have fun, within our worlds.
So cool. Well, you gentlemen have done a fantastic job outlining so many things. There's still so much that we could go into, but we would be here for hours. We'll have to keep an eye on the project, invite you back for a part 2 at some point. However,
give it some time. And I was going to say, once we have a little bit of time to follow through, it'll be interesting to kind of revisit some of these conversations once we're able to talk about them.
100%. But before we let you go, there is a section that we have at the end of every interview that we call You Had Me at Crypto. And it is the same 3 questions we ask every single guest. So both of you are not off the hook yet. We're going to ask you these 3 questions. Alf's going to send those your way.
All right. So I'll ask the question, and then you guys can both, we'll hear from one and then the other. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
You gonna go first, or do you want me to?
You're on the hot seat, David.
Oh, that is such a tough question, because there are there are so many great follows, and Gosh,
That's so hard.
I know,
It's so
I know.
Oh yeah,
hard.
you're
I know
going to
it
make
is.
one really good friend and a lot of enemies who are like, why didn't you say me?
No, if maybe I'll jump ahead of David here. If I had to pick like a person, it would probably be like Richard from Manifold. Not only like who he is as a person, the value he adds to the space, the insights that he has, but like the products that they're building at Manifold, I truly believe are groundbreaking for the ability for independent creators to produce NFTs. I'll go with that, Richard.
David?
Oh, there are so many good ones. So I'm just going to go with one, and this doesn't mean that I'm playing favorites by any means, but I will say Punk 6529, just because I have learned so much just by reading their threads and following that account. And like I said, this is not playing favorites. It's just one of the really great educational resources in the space. And I challenge everybody, just always try and take some time every day to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the space.
All right. Second question. So, what will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Jeez, these
we're
are
going
some
a
of the better
decade out.
questions. I'm like, these are good. Oh, 10 years from now.
10 years from now.
So early October 2032.
Gosh,
Just around the corner.
Gosh, I feel like I shouldn't be making price predictions on
Not financial
on the
advice, not
Not
financial
financial
Yeah.
advice, and we're talking a decade out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It's going to be like $2 million or it's still going to be 20K.
Love it.
Nice.
David,
Okay.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking like right around that $1 million mark. But I guess the bigger question is, how much does that $1 million actually buy you in $2032?
That's
That's
where
right.
I think that's where the question really gets people, because they immediately are like, okay, well, I can talk about where Bitcoin would be if the dollar stays the same, but where's the dollar? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
A lot
All
of
right.
factors.
Third question. What's the most underrated coin or project in all of crypto Web3?
Other than in the Pixel Vault ecosystem.
No self-shilling here.
Oh, NFTs or crypto?
Yeah,
anything.
anything.
And it doesn't have to be like a coin. It can be like a project or like a category such as DeFi. It can be whatever you want.
Another great question.
I gotta give you guys credit. These are some fantastic questions to close. Like they got me going.
Oh, this is
Underrated.
Okay, I got one. I'll go independent creator, one of ones.
Cool.
Cool.
I like it.
I like that.
'Cause, like,
yeah.
I think for most people, again, NFTs are illiquid tokens, but for most people, I think that their approach to buying a one of one is because they want it and they love it. And I think that the asymmetric opportunity to bet on independent creators, and if it happens to appreciate, again, kind of going back to my thesis of the gambling analogy, or the casino analogy, to me, putting my money to back independent creators, enable them to put more of their version of beauty out into the world. And, that as a bet on that creator to continue to produce and appreciate and value, that's a no-brainer to me. I think they're immensely underrated.
I love it. It's like that's a perfect promotion for our one of one OG supporter NFT.
I'm going to go a very different route here, and I'm going to say it is NFT ticketing, and just because the combination of like cool generative art in the form of a ticket, and basically being able to use a digital wallet to gain access to whether it's an online or an in real life event. We saw, a lot of that with Token Proof during, NFT NYC, where, you're able to safely use your phone to kind of get into these like token gated events without actually having to put your tokens at risk. I think that's like a very underrated area of where the space is going. And it's going to still take some time to develop and have it be like very well adopted by by the mainstream population. But I think that's a very underrated area to be focusing on right now.
Fun fact: I know somebody that agrees with you. It's Gary V, and he did it for VCon.
Yeah,
it's so true, VGF. That was exactly what I was going to say. Is that you had mentioned VFriends earlier, and it was the first VCon, and it was an NFT was your ticket, and the prices after the event, like those tickets kept value even because people were like, I want proof that I was at the first ever VCon as well. Those were two great answers to that question that we have not heard before out of all of the episodes. So well done. You guys did a fantastic job walking us through everything Pixel Vault. Thank you so much for joining Alf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.